The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. As the proverb says, tomorrow never comes. There is no such thing as tomorrow. There never will be, because time is always now.
Welcome to the Philosophical Minds podcast, the podcast about the stuff we wonder about
and other things.
All right, we are here with Lance Powers, Director of U.S. Protective Service. He retains over 25 years in strategic business development and global security. He's one of the most diversified officers within the U.S. Protective Service. He's trained as master firearms instructor with other master instructors from the Secret Service, DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshal Service, Department of Homeland Security, LAPD, SWAT, and various other law enforcement agencies across the nation. He's served as an active law enforcement officer on special assignment in the U.S. for over 18 years and currently holds various instructor certifications, some of which include Texas Department of Public Safety Certified LTC Instructor, Defense Alert Systems Law Enforcement, NLD Master Instructor, Sigarms Law Enforcement Rangemaster Instructor, Counter-Terrorist Assault, Close Quarter Battle, and Hostage Rescue Instructor. The list goes on. So yeah, certified badass, essentially, but even though all the seriousness, I love that he maintains a good sense of humor. He's always had my back. So Lance, you come from an interesting line of work, to say the least. Very few people I know radiate with such intensity. You definitely have some pretty intense energy at times, and I'm glad you're on my team. But yeah, I think the only person I know that goes beyond that's probably my wife.
I would agree with that.
But seriously, you're one of the most interesting people I know, so I just had to have you on to share your thoughts. And so thank you for coming on my little podcast and doing this.
You're welcome. I appreciate it. I consider it to be both an honor and a privilege. And, anyone that's in the line of work that I do, law enforcement, military, I mean, everybody's in that work for a reason, and it's obviously to save lives and make a difference in the world. So, whatever information I can provide to help you and others, I mean, I'm here.
All right. Yeah, my wife, she wanted to be a lawyer when she was 6. I'm curious, how was it for you? You seem like you came here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and it appears you've been out of bubblegum for a while now. Tell me a little bit.
I'm probably not the only one. We have a lot of emergency first responders that are in the fight every day. My mother was British intelligence. My father was a U.S. fighter pilot. And I kind of grew up in that world. And like, anyone that works in that industry, I mean, nobody really does it for the money. Then they do it to make a difference. And for us and for the people that surround me and the agency, that's what we're committed to, is saving lives.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Do you mind touching on your mom's involvement in the British intelligence?
I can't go into a whole lot, but my father met her during World War II when he was flying bomber escort. A couple of the German jets came out of nowhere, took out a couple of his guys. She was one of the individuals that interviewed him, and it kind of went from there. And
wow. They're
not here. They're deceased, but pretty incredible stories, both from my father, his experiences, and my mother. And I think that's maybe what's kind of driven me over the years to do what I do.
Definitely. A few things stood out to me that I really liked when first learning about you and what you're up to. And one, you provided protection for Ron Paul during his candidacy, as well as, congressional candidate Sheriff Mack, both of whom I like a lot. I think they both have a lot of aspects about them that I agree with. Ron Paul's criticism of the Fed, Sheriff Richard Mack, he's been a very vocal defender of the Constitution, so that's very cool. So before we talk counterterrorism and potential solutions for all these mass shootings, I want to touch on a few things to kind of kick this off with some fun, if you don't mind. And you might laugh at this question. I figure you may have an interesting response. This Clinton body count, it seems like anyone going after the Clintons in any significant way turn up suicided, so to speak. What are your thoughts on this? Is this just a conspiracy theory, or is there more to it than that? I mean, we know the whole Clinton drug running involvement in Mena, Arkansas, and Bill Clinton's close ties with Epstein. He flew on, the jets countless times to his island. I'm sure there's more, but just really seems like, I don't know. So I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on that whole thing.
Well, I think the biggest question is what was the final investigation on Epstein? Because, a prisoner like that just doesn't hang himself in a high security facility. And two, if you look at the blood trail that dates way, way back, I think it's really at this point more than a conspiracy because those people are deceased and they were all connected to the source. And that's really all I can say. It's tough from the outside looking in, but when you really add up the numbers, how many people are involved, how many people are deceased, and then the latest, Epstein, honestly, it's pretty disturbing. But just like a lot of other things that have been covered up, unfortunately, by the government, we may never know.
Right. And there's definitely some interesting connections with Ghislaine Maxwell and Robert Maxwell. I don't know if you're familiar with any of that.
Yeah. The political world is what the media reports is only half the true story. And
Right.
there's just a lot of stuff that goes on behind the closed doors that, the American public doesn't know about, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And
So on
go ahead.
that note, what are some of the worst examples thriving real-time corruption right now that's happening in the U.S. or internationally that you're aware of? Is it sex trafficking? Is it organ harvesting in China? What are some of the hot spots for like terrible crime against humanity in your estimation, or large threats towards America that you would like to see solved either locally or globally?
Well, one thing is I think it's a blessing that we have a president like Donald Trump that's really trying to keep America safe, believe it or not. And you look at how he's now gone to drastic measures to secure our borders, which recently were not secured. And that's where a lot of human trafficking came into play. The cartel was having a heyday. You can look back to Fast and Furious. You can look at Benghazi. That was all during the Obama administration. And I think with a strong president like Donald Trump, and I don't think it really comes down to whether you're a liberal, Republican, or Democrat. It's about what's the best for America and what's going to make the difference. There's a lot of conspiracies out there, but I think one of the greatest threats we have right now is the fact that America is not as safe as it should be. The virus is a perfect example of that. Something that can migrate from another country, and then by the time we detect it, substantial damage has not only been done, innocent lives lost, but our economy has also been dramatically affected. And to my knowledge, we're still trying to trace the source. I think that's what I call a bioengineered virus. I don't think that's something that's natural. And I think everyone started to look at that as that situation continues to grow and become a dramatic threat to our country, our nation, and our people. There's been all types of theories about trafficking. They just basically changed the name, but we have the same issues in our country. And hopefully with active law enforcement and a president that's trying to make a difference, we can change that. But in the past, there's been a lot of unaccountability, especially with the Obama administration. And I'm not a very political person. I don't live my life by politics. I try to live my life by what's doing right versus what's doing wrong.
Right. And yeah, some things that come to mind in terms of horrible corruption for me is this open air slave trade in Libya, I believe largely escalated due to Obama's assassination of Omar Gaddafi, illegally destabilizing that region, and other things, as these Muslim concentration camps in China. With situations like these, I guess I'm curious also your take on what the United States' role should be in terms of aiding and resolving global humanitarian issues and crises.
Well, I think one thing is where we made the mistake during the Obama administration, and I don't really want to focus on the Obama administration, but there's one thing I've realized, and I've traveled globally. We still do. We have teams deployed right now all over the world. We cannot police the world. We need to protect and take care of our own people. If we're going to provide aid, then we need to have enough intelligence that's accurate to verify that the money that we're putting out there or the people that we're putting on the ground that are providing that aid, that those are actual real needs that are being met and served by us, versus sending over millions of dollars where it never gets to the source and ends up getting in the hands of the wrong people. And that's happened time and time again. Definitely. So there's always going to be challenges in the world, but I think what we need to look at is to be a great country and to have the ability to help other people, we need to be strong within. And right now, we still have a lot of holes that need to be repaired. Right now, we're fighting a major epidemic, which is obviously the virus. And, that's my take on it. Anything we can do to make the world a better place is great, but not at the expense of our own people. And I
Definitely.
think that's when intelligence comes into play. And we just need to make sure that before we deploy or we send any aid anywhere, that that's a true cause and that the aid that we're providing is going to be served by the people that truly need it.
Definitely. Now, in terms of engaging in foreign regime change, wars, in response to potential terror threats, how successful has this been in the past, in your opinion? And additionally, these CIA interventions and foreign elections, sometimes overt, sometimes covert, are these effective and successful strategies in your view for really treating a potential malignancy? Is this a form of empire building sometimes, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the sad thing is it's really hard to make an accurate assessment because there's so many things that go on behind the closed doors that us as American people, even level one military law enforcement, will never even know about. Some of the tactics that we've employed obviously probably have been effective, but at this point, do we really know?
Right.
You can only believe, and don't take this the wrong way, but in my opinion, you can maybe believe 40% of what the media reports.
Definitely.
You can see that through the history of just news, unfortunately.
Now, I know you're pretty much in favor of Trump. I personally have mixed feelings about him. I think he might be doing some good things behind the scenes on one level, but then again, I have plenty of concerns and criticisms of many of the things he does and his past dealings. If you had to think of a pro and a con with Donald Trump and his actions as president, what would they be? Something you like and maybe a criticism, if any come to mind.
I'd say pro. I think he's an extremely smart businessman. He's taken the country, our nation, out of a nosedive financially. He's brought jobs back. He's basically made America strong again, where we were weak. And we had many countries that were taking advantage of us, which were costing thousands of American jobs. I think as a negative or a con, I think he is a brilliant businessman. I just don't think he's that great of a speaker, because sometimes I feel like he lets his emotions overtake his language skills. And I think that's negative, because then sometimes I think his communication is misconstrued. Because you can send a text or you can send an email. What you read is different than the words that you speak out of your mouth. Those can be misinterpreted. So I would say that he could be a little bit better in diplomacy in the way that he communicates. But then we also have to take in consideration we've had a lot of people try to destroy him, when his main focus is making our country a better place to live and making sure it's a safe place to live. So that would be my pro and con of my eval on him.
Great. Now, in regards to terrorism, as someone who's involved in understanding the dynamics of counterterrorism, what is your take on the recent assassination of Soleimani? Do you believe that that was handled correctly? Would you have done anything differently? Is that more complex? What are your thoughts on that assassination of the Iranian general?
I think at that point, that was a good strategic move to let that country know that America is not going to stand for any actions that are going to put American lives at risk or any of our allies. They say if you put your hand through the cage too many times, sooner or later the dog's going to bite it. And I think what it came down to is they finally got bit. And I think it sent a message that America is strong again. And unlike the Obama administration, where we even had, I believe it was maybe that country, if I remember reading right, but we even had one of our Navy ships confiscated with sailors on board, and we basically didn't do anything about it. Whereas now they know that America has got a strong military presence, and we're not going to tolerate terrorism. And unfortunately, that individual was a A+ terrorist. He had taken a lot of lives.
All right.
So I would say I would support that strategic move on behalf of the Trump administration and our military.
Now, I want to talk about all these shootings and some possible solutions. Is there any underlying cause to these? How big of a role do you think mental health plays into it? Maybe if you're aware of any statistical data around the individuals carrying out these shootings, have you recognized any patterns?
Well, I think America has a major challenge with dealing with, number one, mental, and also dealing with the homeless. And I think some of your active shootings are based on that. Obviously, if you run history on active shootings and actional violence, there's a percentage of those are what I call mental based. I think we need a better system to help the mental. And obviously, anything we can do that will provide early detection of somebody that might be mentally unstable and be a potential threat to a school or any facility, business, company, corporation, I think that would be viable. But I also just think in the world that we live in today, evil is everywhere, and that's why we look at an active shooter as a terrorist. Their main focus is to kill as many as they can with the end result of taking their own life. And I think if you look at the history of active shootings, that's been the case in many scenarios.
Yeah. Now, this might seem like a little bit of a conspiratorial question. I'm sure you've heard of the term false flags. Are there any false flags that you're aware of? False flag, a covert operation designed to deceive, creating the appearance of a particular party, group, or nation being responsible for some activity, disguising the actual source of responsibility. That we can come back to that if you want. But with these shootings, could you ever see these stories being pushed in the media to threaten our Second Amendment rights? Do you think it's possible these events could ever be used to attempt to create laws that would potentially attempt to disarm the public in any way? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. I think anytime you see states trying to basically take any type of weapon away from a law-abiding citizen, that's a major problem. And I think if you look at the Las Vegas mass shooting, there's just a lot of things out there that don't add up. And, there's conspiracy theories everywhere, but that's something, if you really look at it, has it ever been investigated? From the active shooter, what was the provocation for him actually taking all those innocent lives? Everything that I ever read or saw, there was really no provocation. The guy was not mental. Obviously, there were no indicators that he was going to go that way. And, what was hotel security doing? Which, that's a whole nother story. But, for a shooter to be that active for that long in a stationary position, that's disturbing. And really, was there more than one shooter? That's another thing. There was a lot of people that lost their lives that day. Definitely. So I'd say if there's a conspiracy, that would be something that needs to be looked at, because it just seemed to fade away. And I don't ever remember reading anything about what the final conclusion was. A
lot of weirdness around that. I know there's a lot of helicopters floating around as well. What are your thoughts on guys like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange? Snowden, he's known for exposing the NSA's spying program. Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, with the whole thing about Hillary's emails and publishing the classified documents to highlight human rights abuses. And it can be kind of debated one way or another with regards to the breaches of the Espionage Act. But anyway, he remains, in prison. And then we've got Snowden living low-key in Russia. So, what are your thoughts on all that with them?
Well, it's kind of a catch-22. As far as, revealing anything that puts our country at risk, our military at risk, I definitely am not a supporter of that. I think that individual should be obviously served with the time that's due for the crime. If there's information that puts the American people at risk because whatever covert action is being taken is really illegal and someone is overstepping their power, that's a different story. But, the problem is America has been so soft for so long, it's almost like they've opened the door to allow those incidents to happen. I don't think that, that information should be shared to anyone if it puts America at risk.
So with Snowden, you kind of view him as more of a traitor than a patriot?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And then, so, as we're both very interested in AI and advanced technology, I wanted to get your thoughts on some technological innovations some people may not be aware of in relation to counterterrorism. So bear with me as I formulate this kind of long-winded question. I'm really interested in what are called fusion centers and how they play into data gathering for potential terrorist activity. And I wonder if you've ever visited any of these fusion centers. Supposedly there are at least one per state. And for someone like myself who's obsessed with researching things like secret societies, intelligence agencies, government corruption, what's really going on behind the scenes, and using my First Amendment right to disseminate that information and my ideas, I get a little nervous lately about exploring specific subjects involving corruption within certain agencies. And I really want to get your take on this. So in your opinion, for someone like myself, should I be worried about being put on some list somewhere? Should I be concerned about fusion centers collecting my data and algorithmically flagging my search results as potential terrorist activity? Should I be worried about my name being put on some standard nomination form as a targeted individual at some terrorist screening center at the FBI for looking into CIA special access programs? Or is that just unwarranted paranoia, in your opinion?
I think it's unwanted. I mean, I think the reality is the reason we have those centers is to protect America from within, because once again, what the media is not reporting is we do have potential terrorists within our country. They've come in through the border for I don't know how many years. If you look at the Obama administration and how much traffic, I mean, look at Fast and Furious. I mean, pretty much the drug cartel had free flow from our border into the U.S. back and forth. There was nothing stopping these people. Human trafficking is one thing, but there was a lot more going on in that. But I think as far as the centers go, I think that's just internal protection for the American people. If it comes to the point where it's violating our freedom and our rights, that's a different story. But if they're looking for people that shouldn't be here and they have the ability to detect that before they actually, blow up a large venue or take a lot of innocent American lives, then I'm a strong supporter of that. I can't tell you if I've been to those centers or not, but they're designed to detect terrorists operating within America because there are obviously several here.
All right. Now, with dignitary protection in the security realm, what are some of the specialized kind of tactical training methods that you find most effective when it comes to identifying a potential threat and handling that threat in the best manner? I know you've done some work with, Chris Costa, and he's got a strong focus on situational awareness, for example.
Right.
What all does that entail when providing any form of executive or dignitary protection?
Well, I think one major situation that needs to always be addressed is what are your intelligence capabilities? Because, one thing that I've learned over the years is, having the ability to respond to a threat and neutralize that threat is just as important as knowing that that threat's there. So my response, I can't give you exactly how we operate, but we're very strong on intelligence, so we know where we're at, where we're supposed to be, what the potential threat environment is, how to address that potential threat environment. So to answer your question, making sure that the people you have on that detail are trained correctly, effectively, and they're vetted, and also having intelligence that's accurate. So, whatever it is you're protecting, you have the ability to protect it well. Because I see that's where a lot of security details fail. Just because you have a badge and a gun does not mean you're bulletproof, and it also definitely doesn't mean that your package or that individual or individuals you're assigned to protect are always going to be safe. And that's where intelligence and countermeasures come into play.
Definitely. With all this training embedded you over the years, I'd imagine you're constantly switched on, analyzing everyone's micro expressions. Is it kind of hard to turn it off sometimes?
Yeah, those that are out there in the same line of work that I am, you have it's almost like muscle memory where you learn to read body language. You look for signatures on the body to see if you see a weapon. Eye contact. You look to see if there's a blender. So you may think you have one threat, but you actually have several. It just becomes a part of your life. And like today, there's a lot of Americans out there that are eliminating what they would normally have to be called tunnel vision, to where they have a 360 view because they're looking just as civilians on making sure that their family's protected and they're safe wherever they go. And years ago, it didn't used to be that way. You just honestly felt safe, and something happened, law enforcement would be there to take care of that problem. But even now, a lot of law enforcement agencies are challenged, and we're losing a lot of officers just due to how evil in the world is growing.
Yeah, definitely. So, in terms of back to terror and wars on terror, I wanted to kind of get your take on something. So just give me a minute so I can kind of carefully finish out my thoughts, because it's kind of a complex, dynamic topic.
Okay.
But then I can get your response. So I want to preface this with, I'm not anti-Semitic, and I love all people and respect freedom of religion as long as it doesn't infringe on me. I love Jewish people. I got a large percentage of Ashkenazi blood running through my own veins, although that's a different story, whether or not Ashkenazi links to the true Semitic lines. But anyway, I love all people. I've got Jewish friends, love Jewish people. So this is not a knock on Jews, but I think Zionism is a real thing, and I think it's dangerous. So what I want to get your take on is a few things. The Israeli Defense Forces and the ongoing international war crimes, as well as its relation to the recent anti-Semitic executive order and its banning of the boycott, divest, sanction movement here in the United States. What we're talking about here, we're talking about Palestinian natives being pushed out of their homes, the Israeli government installing settlements. It's been ongoing for years now. These people have, their water and electricity controlled, if they even have water or electricity at all. They mostly live in a military occupation under martial law, and I've really got a soft spot for oppressed, voiceless groups, especially when it appears the mainstream media and the military-industrial complex have a gigantic, bias in terms of how they view the situation. I mean, I really don't see any greater example than this of straight-up ethnic cleansing. What are your thoughts on that whole situation going on with Israel and Palestine?
Well, if you look at the history, for honestly thousands of years, they've been at war with one another. So I think, it's kind of hard to keep, and I'm not referring to either entity, but, when you've got two dogs that are always fighting, you've got to find a way to separate them. And I think, the stronger dog obviously gets a little bit more food and a little bit more room to move around in than the smaller dog. But I think when it comes down to it, people are people, and unfortunately religion is religion. And that's a very tough challenge, because there's been a lot of innocent lives lost. They've been fighting for years. I think every religion should be respected, just as long as it doesn't end up taking innocent lives or affecting other people. So, that's a really, really tough question. And how do you police something like that? As America, we cannot be the police force of the world. We don't have those capabilities, number one. And number two, we can't even take care of our own. So I guess my question would be is, from an outsider looking in, there's probably some pros to that, but there's obviously some cons to that, or negative.
Yeah.
I think every race should be treated equally, but if one race is trying to kill the other race, you've got to figure out some type of formula to prevent that without creating genocide. So I think that's why you see the Israelis have stepped up, securing their borders. They're prepared to respond. But if nobody attacks each other, then there shouldn't be that type of diversity as far as, separation, if that makes sense. I mean, they don't really have a choice. It's going to matter what the Palestinians do or what the Israelis do. They're always going to be at war. So if there's any way they can separate, themselves from each other and maintain peace, that's really what it's about.
Yeah. Do you
And
think
with that, unfortunately, with that, Scholar, everyone knows there's a price to pay. Doesn't matter what country you are or who you are as a people.
Definitely. Do you think a two-state solution is ever a possibility? Do you think that's something?
Based on how many lives are lost, and that all comes down to the religion. Some types of religion just can't coexist with other religion. You know what I mean? It has to be completely separated. And I think that's the challenge over there, is they have their way of thinking and their beliefs, and then the Palestinians have their way of thinking and their beliefs. It'd be nice if each country and all the people in those countries could just respect each other and just have boundaries that they don't cross. But once that happens, and it continues to happen, then usually the stronger party, they'll do what needs to be done.
Right.
And honestly, unfortunately, there's a lot of innocents that are involved in that on both sides.
Definitely, yeah. What are some most valuable or essential tactical training methodologies or skill sets one should seek to acquire for self-defense or overall individual capability that would provide like a tremendous benefit throughout one's life? What are some skills or trainings that you would recommend for just anybody who wants to, kind of be able to protect themselves and just in everyday life?
Well, I think we have a philosophy at the agency that in order to save a life, you need to know how to take a life. And one thing that I see across the nation is I'm a huge advocate of concealed carry, and I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment. But I think it is a great asset for anyone if they have the ability to take a course on verbal judo. So if they get into some type of dispute or confrontation, if they can escalate it down to where there's no violence required to do that, that's always a positive. Because once again, you really never know what that person's dealing with. They could have lost their job that day. Their wife could have divorced them. So if you have some type of verbal judo skills, that's always a plus. All of our agents are trained in verbal judo. That's a big plus for us. I know law enforcement is starting to put strong focus on that because, communication is key, and sometimes that can prevent violence. The other thing that I would definitely recommend is before you learn to handle a weapon, whether it's a pistol or a carbine or a shotgun, you should look at a non-lethal option because we all carry non-lethals. I mean, if you have a dispute with somebody and it looks like it's going to become a viable threat, it's, and you have the ability to shut them down without taking their life just because that day you decided to carry a non-lethal, such as military and law enforcement grade OC or pepper spray, whatever you feel protects you the best. That should be your second option. Your last option should be having to respond with a weapon, because anyone in our world knows that if you draw that weapon, then somebody's probably going to lose their life.
Yeah.
And,
What's your favorite weapon of choice, and why?
Well, I mean, for us in our world, sometimes backup isn't an option. So we carry a 9mm pistol. Allows you, I think, better accuracy than a larger weapon and more rounds to put on the threat. We run G45s. Glock is always reliable. Law enforcement, military use Glock. There's a lot of good weapons out there, but any gun is a gun. It's really the operator behind it. And it also, when you're looking at choosing a weapon for home protection or if you're going to carry it every day as an EDC, that weapon needs to be based on your skill set. I see a lot of people go out there and they spend a ridiculous amount of money on a weapon such as a, tricked out pistol, but the reality is they don't even know how to use a stock pistol. And so that's what I always recommend. I have a lot of people that ask me, you need to find out what you're comfortable with. I mean, if you're a small female and you're 5'4", not realistic probably to go buy a 45 Glock 21 and think that you're going to be able to effectively carry that concealed on a daily basis. So, and that's one thing that I also recommend, if you are going to carry a weapon, carry something that you feel comfortable using and practice with it. It's not a toy. It's not something to show around. It's something that could save your life or the life of others. So, there's a lot of different options out there.
Definitely.
But you need to get with an educated professional that can show you the options and then maybe make a recommendation that based on, who you are, what your skill set is, your past experiences, can make an accurate recommendation.
So what's some advice that you would give people during this kind of crazy situation going on right now? Any advice for the people out there?
Well, I'd say, first of all, compassion, because, a lot of people out there are scared. A lot of them may have already lost their job. A lot of them may not even know if they're going to have a job. So as far as protecting yourself, once again, make sure you have some type of verbal judo skills. Always be alert. Don't have tunnel vision. Make sure that you're familiar with your surroundings. If you need to go somewhere, especially at night, make sure if you can go with a friend or someone else that can help, keep an eye open. Because my prediction is if we don't soon find a cure for the virus, things could change to where the environment could be somewhat dangerous. Crime is going to go up, and that's just the way it is.
Definitely.
So, my recommendation, just, if you have a security system at home, make sure you turn it on and make sure you have something to protect yourself with, whether it's a non-lethal or a lethal. But when you're out and about, be alert, be aware.
I want to bounce back to this verbal judo real quick because I've heard the expression verbal judo, but I was never actually aware that literally you could be trained. Where would somebody go to train in verbal?
I think law enforcement training, which the brothers in blue know, I mean, there's certain courses that are for law enforcement only, but there's courses online that you can basically take. I believe, if I remember right, there's a school you can go and take a class, or you can download information. But really verbal judo, what it amounts to is it's adult to parent, parent to child, thinking about someone, you know, if you're engaged, you know, how do you diffuse that? How do you take a non-aggressive stance so that that individual doesn't feel threatened? And there's a lot of great information that you can find online that will help you hopefully shut down that situation before it escalates. Because when it escalates, it could be literally a matter of seconds before you have to decide what plan two is. You know, does this individual have a weapon? Are they going to engage you in a lethal manner? If they are, how are you going to save your life and prevent them from killing you?
Yeah.
You know, and if they're a lot bigger than you, are you going to deploy a non-lethal? And that's the big problem. I have a lot of people are carrying weapons, but they're not carrying a non-lethal option. So the only option they have to respond is a lethal option. So I call it the rule of three. If you can use verbal judo, that's the best place to start. If not, and you don't have the time and it's escalated past that, if you've determined that that threat is unarmed and you have the ability to shut them down with a non-lethal deployment, that's a lot better option than shooting them and taking their life on that premises.
Definitely. Now, in terms of self-defense training, what do you think's the most superior? Is it Krav Maga? Is it Sistema? Is it Jiu-Jitsu? In your mind, what would be, you know, something that you would recommend?
Well, we train under Krav Maga, but there are some great arts out there: Hapkido, Aikido, Muay Thai, Taekwondo. Really, any form of self-defense is better than no form of self-defense at all. So with respect to all the arts out there, there's some really good ones. It really comes down to the individual and what they feel the most comfortable and what they adapt to the best. Any type of self-defense training, regardless of what the style is always a plus in my niche. You just like rape prevention. That's really good for women. There's just a lot of really good sources for training out there if you walk that path.
Yeah. And I know you recently developed a knife as well. Would you recommend people carrying a knife on them? And you want to talk a little bit maybe about the recent knife development project?
Yeah, we developed a knife with a company called Guardian Tactical, and it's basically, we developed it to serve multiple purposes. It's great for utility. If you need to cut boxes, you need to use it in the field, if you're a hunter, if you're a construction worker. But the real great advantages of the knife is it's got an impact device, so you can break out a window and cut somebody out of a seatbelt if they're in a car wreck. It's been a pretty big hit with law enforcement because it also has some great self-defense features. So it's an OTF, which that's something else everyone needs to be aware of, is, you know, out the front blade knives, which are automatic deployed. It's a 4-inch blade. Some states prohibit OTFs. That's why we also have a folder in development. But we just wanted to develop a knife that someone could carry in a suit with a pair of blue jeans, if they're active law enforcement, with a uniform, but it serves several purposes. You know, had great safety features to save a life. It also has a lanyard carry option. So if you want to deep pocket carry that knife and you don't want anyone to know that you're carrying it, that you can carry a knife at work, but you can't carry a handgun, and you feel that you need that extra protection, or you simply want something to save a life, that's what we developed the Recon Elite to do. And it's an amazing knife. American made and built by one of the best, in my opinion, knife manufacturers in the United States, called Guardian Tactical.
Beautiful. And where could people go to get their hands on one of those?
There's dealers right now, which, you know, sounds like a sales plug, but I don't do sales. Most of the dealers right now that have been carrying the knife are all sold out. We have another production run. I was advised by Guardian Tactical. You also can go to our agency website, which is usprotectiveservice.com, and you can place an order there. We have a lot of law enforcement officers going there and purchasing the knife, and we have all walks of life purchasing the knife. So, you know, when we designed it, like I said, to be a multifarious knife, regardless of the environment. It's going to be reliable and dependable, and that's what we designed it to do. There's not a lot of knives out there that have that many safety features and self-defense features built into it. So usprotectiveservice.com, or there's also a company called bladehq.com, among other top knife dealers out there that are carrying the knife.
Awesome. Now, is there any last thoughts that you want to leave the audience on? Any last comments you want to?
Well, from what I do for a living and what I've learned is sometimes I think Americans forget just how great our nation is. And really, regardless whether you're a liberal, a Democrat, or a Republican, it's one nation under God. We're all Americans. And there's a lot of people around this world that want to kill us. So instead of us working against each other, I think we should all come together and we should reunite as the nation that we are. And regardless of your skin color, regardless of what your likes and dislikes are, everyone deserves respect. And I think that's where we've lost that over the years, just based on a lot of the things that have taken place. But that's kind of my 2 cents. I mean, I believe in brotherhood. I believe in integrity. I believe in loyalty. And I believe in treating your fellow American with respect. And that's where I see a lot of issues in our country. I mean, it didn't used to be that way. But I think as time progresses, I see that causes separation. So that'd be my 2 cents.
All right. I love it. This was great. Thank you, Lance. And
You're welcome.
Enjoy your night.
Thank you. Have a good time. And thank you for the interview.
All right.